The panel was set up to discuss the shifting dynamics of global economics and diplomacy. With prominent figures like Karoline Leavitt and Mark Carney on stage, the expectations were high. The audience, both in the studio and online, was brimming with anticipation. Leavitt, known for her bold opinions and unapologetic tone, took her seat with a sense of command. The moderator opened the floor with a general question about international cooperation. Without missing a beat, Leavitt launched into a sharp critique. "Let's be honest," she began. "Canada might be a nice vacation spot, but in terms of real influence, military, economic or diplomatic, it's simply irrelevant in today's global power structure." The room fell into a tense silence. Viewers at home leaned forward. Leavitt continued, characterizing Canada's policies as naive, its government as too polite to lead, and its economy as riding on the coattails of its neighbors. The moment was incendiary, not just for the bluntness of the statement, but for the fact that one of Canada's most distinguished public servants, Mark Carney, was seated just a few feet away. The camera panned to him, catching his stoic reaction. No visible flinch, no raised eyebrow. Just silence and a slight nod, as if acknowledging the gauntlet that had been thrown at his feet. What followed would become the turning point of the discussion and a defining moment in modern discourse. The atmosphere was electric. The audience waited, breath held, for Carney's response. In that moment, it wasn't just about defending a nation's honor. It was about how to confront condescension with intellect, pride with principle. The moment unfolded with an air of tension veiled beneath polite smiles. Karoline Leavitt, known for her bold commentary, leaned forward in her chair during the panel discussion on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert. The topic was international cooperation and North American economic policy. The conversation was lively, but civil, until Leavitt turned her attention to Canada. "Well, let's be honest," she said with a sharp smirk. "Canada has always been a junior partner. You follow America's lead, enjoy our security, and benefit from our innovations. You don't lead, you trail, that's just a fact." The studio fell silent for a split second, long enough for the weight of her words to settle. Some in the audience gasped softly. Stephen Colbert raised his eyebrows in surprise, clearly not expecting such a loaded remark. Karoline's comment wasn't just dismissive, it bordered on condescension. Mark Carney, the former governor of the Bank of Canada and Bank of England, didn't flinch. Sitting just a few seats away, he folded his hands and took a breath, letting the silence do the heavy lifting. The camera panned to his face, calm, composed, but unreadable. It was the kind of moment that needed no script, only truth and timing. Karoline seemed unaware, or perhaps unconcerned, by the tension she had ignited. "Look," she added as if doubling down, "I respect our neighbors, but they have to accept their place. America leads. Everyone else follows." That's when Mark Carney slowly leaned forward. His reply, though not yet spoken, already hung in the air. The audience could feel it. Something was coming, and it wasn't going to be polite or rehearsed. It would be deliberate, dignified, and devastating. The silence was about to be broken. Mark Carney adjusted his cuffs and leaned in, the studio lights catching a flicker of steel in his gaze. "With all due respect, Karoline," he began, his tone steady and clipped with precision, "Canada may not blare its own horn, but it's been one of the world's most stable democracies, a leader in renewable energy, banking, and multicultural integration, while maintaining a social fabric that doesn't tear when politics get heated." The audience leaned in, a collective hush spreading as Carney's voice grew firmer. As for innovation, let's not forget that Canada has contributed to breakthroughs in quantum computing, AI ethics, and public healthcare systems that others are still trying to understand, let alone implement. He paused, giving Karoline a measured glance before continuing. The idea that leadership can only come through dominance reflects a very narrow view of global cooperation. Leadership is about integrity, not volume, about influence, not intimidation. Karoline opened her mouth, but Carney held up a hand gently. And while we're speaking of security, Canada has stood beside the United States in every major global conflict. Not as a follower, but as an ally. Respect is earned, not granted by one side. The room erupted in applause, raucous, unfiltered, and long. Even Stephen Colbert nodded with visible respect. Karoline sat back, her expression unreadable. The power dynamic had shifted, not through insult, but through a quiet confidence and unwavering command of truth. Carney didn't gloat. He simply offered a small, respectful nod to the crowd, then to Colbert, as if to say, "We don't shout to be heard. We act, and the world listens." And in that moment it was clear, intellect and humility had won the day. As the crowd's applause settled, Karoline Leavitt composed herself and leaned forward again, her tone shifting noticeably. "Well, that was eloquent," she said, managing a faint smile. "But I still believe in telling it like it is. The world needs more blunt honesty, not polite diplomacy." Mark Carney didn't flinch. Instead, he responded with the kind of calm that comes from years of negotiating global crises. "Blunt honesty has its place, Karoline, but when it's used without knowledge or empathy, it becomes little more than noise. Noise doesn't change the world. Clarity does." The atmosphere in the studio had changed. This wasn't just a clash of personalities. It had become a philosophical reckoning, a deeper dialogue about leadership, legacy, and the power of discourse. Stephen Colbert, sensing the gravity of the moment, sat back and let the conversation unfold. Carney leaned into the heart of the matter. What we choose to amplify matters. If we demean others to elevate ourselves, we undermine the very values we claim to defend. Patriotism isn't proven by volume. It's shown through service, sacrifice, and the willingness to listen, even when it's uncomfortable. Karoline paused, clearly recalibrating. There was no room left for theatrics. For the first time, she nodded. Not in agreement, perhaps, but in recognition. The discussion had moved beyond borders and politics. It had become about what kind of world we're trying to build and who we trust to shape it. That exchange would be replayed, quoted, and studied, not for its confrontation, but for its clarity. Mark Carney hadn't just defended Canada. He had offered a vision of thoughtful, resilient leadership in a time that sorely needed it, and in doing so, he changed the tone of the room, and perhaps the narrative itself. As the echoes of their fiery exchange faded, the audience sat in stunned silence. Mark Carney's calm but firm defense of Canada had resonated deeply, not only with those present in the studio, but across social media, where the moment was already going viral. Meanwhile, Karoline Leavitt sat visibly flustered, her usual sharp confidence seemed dulled by the weight of the former Bank of Canada and Bank of England governors' pointed rebuke. Sensing an opportunity to bridge the tension, Colbert leaned into his role as host. "Well," he quipped, "that was more educational than most economics classes I've slept through." The audience laughed, easing the atmosphere just enough to let the conversation move forward. But it was Carney's final words that sealed the moment in history. Turning to Leavitt, he said, "Debate is the lifeblood of democracy, but before you attack a nation's values, take the time to understand them. Canada may be polite, but never mistake kindness for weakness." The crowd erupted in applause, not out of spite toward Leavitt, but in recognition of the dignity and depth with which Carney had handled the confrontation. In the aftermath, headlines praised Carney's composure and statesmanship. Clips of the exchange topped trending lists. Even critics admitted that Carney had turned an insult into a teachable moment. Karoline, for her part, issued a brief statement later that week, noting that while she stood by her views, she respected the spirit of dialogue. Some saw it as backpedaling, others as growth. Regardless, the moment became a symbol of how intellect and respect can still prevail in public discourse, even when tempers flare. And as the spotlight moved on, the legacy of that televised moment lingered, a rare flash of philosophical clarity in an age of soundbites and shouting matches.